Welcome to Real GM Radio. Before we jump in, do me a favor and subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel to catch the podcast when we record live, tune into the best segments, and join the Real GM Radio community. It helps me, it helps you, it's a win-win. Find us on youtube.com/@RealGMRadio. All right, it's a Monday monologue here on Real GM Radio. We are putting a bow on the Houston Rockets season and looking at what comes next. All right, Monday monologue here, Real GM Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg, and I've spent a lot of time over, the second half of the season, really, talking about the Houston Rockets, Thompson, their chances against the Warriors, and why I thought I was just a little bit higher on the Rockets than consensus. I picked the Rockets in 7 games over the Warriors. I don't know if that means I'm taking an L, just because the Warriors beat the Rockets in 7 games. When you pick a 7-game series, you're kind of picking a coin flip series, and Houston was at home. They had the home court advantage, so I took Houston in 7. That said, really impressed with the Warriors for the most part, even though I still have some questions about them. I'm not going to pick them against Minnesota, but I was impressed nonetheless with what they did and being able to win a playoff series. This is not what we thought they would be before the Jimmy Butler trade. The Warriors did not look like a team that could win a playoff series, even against the inexperienced Houston Rockets. But they managed to find a way. They did the thing that the Warriors always do, where you could argue that Houston had the better matchup. They were probably they might have had the advantage in the matchup given all their size and their wave of good players and role players. Heck, you could even argue that they had the better game plan for 7 games. The zone really threw Steph Curry off and all these things, but they did what the Warriors do, and they found a way. And Draymond was really good defensively in Game 7. He had his moments. Remember the big stop in Game 4 and all these things. Steph was shut out in the first half of Game 7 and then erupted in the second half because he is just one of these guys where you just can't give him a chance. He couldn't find any daylight in the first half. Thompson, Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, these in that zone defense, they were just shutting off all the water on Steph in that first half. And then he gets a little bit of daylight. You give him a little crack, and the guy just opens the whole damn door and just erupts, and the floodgates just open. And at that point, there's no containing him. And I don't know, the margin for error there is so thin, and Steph makes it look so easy that I think we almost take it for granted, given everything that he's had to deal with in that series. And he was worn down physically, and he's dealing with the thumb thing and all that stuff, and it did not matter. You can't keep that guy back. So really impressed with him, but my big takeaway from the Warriors is, even in this new Big 3 era for Golden State, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Jimmy Butler, they still need a role player to step up. And in Game 7, it was Buddy Hield in that first half, over 20 points in that first half, lights out from three-point range. Really did a good job of filling the gaps where Houston was overhelping and aggressive on Steph. And maybe overhelping is not even the right word because they were doing it on purpose, but sending a lot of attention to Steph, and Steph did a really good job where I thought in Game 6 there was no answer for that zone. In Game 7, Steph was like, well, I'm just going to keep moving. And if I keep moving, that just means everybody else is going to get attention, but that means it's going to be up to somebody else to fill in the gaps behind me. Just fill in behind me. When these guys are following me, even in their zone, it's a matchup zone, they're following me in the zone. When they're following me, somebody's got to be there to fill in behind me. And Buddy Hield did that, and he still had to make the shots. He got the open shots. He made the open shots. Huge credit. Probably the biggest moment in Buddy Hield's career. Definitely, right? That was awesome for him. So it's the big 3 in Golden State, but they still need a role player to step up, and that's when they've always been really good. And that's why I had my doubts about them going into Houston, is because the role players tended to play way better at home than they did on the road, especially in this series. But Buddy Hield had the game of his life, and the Warriors are moving on because of it. Going forward against Minnesota, that's my main question is, can they get those role players to step up consistently in 4 of these 7 potential games? So that's the big thing with the Warriors. Let's go back to the Houston Rockets, because I do want to put a bow on their season, because I spent so much time talking about them this year, because I find them fascinating. Was this season a success for the Houston Rockets? Look, you were the number 2 seed in the West. You lost to the 7 seed. Tough look. You lost Game 7 at home. Tough look. You lost to the Warriors, and the fan base has a history with that team. Tough look. It's a tough look. That said, this was not a normal 2 versus 7. The Western Conference was so cramped at the top. We're talking about 3-4 games separating most of these teams. This was not a normal 2 versus 7. And because of that, I'm not that worried about, oh my God, you're number 2 seed. How could you lose to a team that was in the play-in tournament? I'm not that worried about it. So that's fine. And to answer the question, yes, I think this season was a success. They made the playoffs. And more than anything, they didn't. It's one thing to be a 2 versus 7 and lose, and maybe get like, what if they lost to the Warriors in 5 games? Right? When this series was 3-1, the fact that they battled back and forced a game 7, that's huge. Because now you showed that you deserved to be on the floor. And the people out of Houston were saying the entire time, even down 3-1, hey, we know it's 3-1, but we think this series is a lot closer than what the 3-1 shows. Every one of these games has been a really tight margin, has been a possession game for the most part. And I agreed with them. I thought Houston was playing Golden State way closer than that 3-1 lead showed. It was just, hey, this is what we're talking about, right? Like the Warriors have closers and you don't. And so they closed those tight margin games. But they were right. It was a close series. They won 2 straight games. They forced a game 7. I thought that game 7 was pretty close until Steph got the score was a little wonky at halftime, but I still thought it was pretty close. And then Steph just shut the door on him in the second half. But the fact that you made the playoffs, remember, the Rockets did not make the playoffs last year. The fact that they made the playoffs and then showed that they deserved to be on the same floor against the Golden State Warriors. And you could, 2 versus 7, of course, again, not a thing. Not worried about that. You deserve to be on the floor against Steph, Draymond, Jimmy Butler, Steve Kerr, and you didn't look phased at all. And man, they were confident in that series. This is a legit playoff team. And considering where this team had gone, and 5 years removed from the James Harden trade and the rebuild that it launched, and to be here now, I think that's extremely successful. But here's why, to me, this season, even losing in the first round, is a major success for the Houston Rockets. You learned what you don't have, and you learned what you need to do this offseason. You need a go-to scorer. And we all pretty much knew that going into the playoffs. It's a reason why very few people were picking the Houston Rockets to win this series at all. It's because they just don't have that number one go-to scorer who you could trust on an every night basis. But you don't really know it until you're put in the ultimate stress test. And that's what this series was. And they could have won this series, and they did not. Mainly because they didn't have that go-to scorer. On the nights where Jalen Green or Fred VanVleet were playing really well, the Rockets won. And they looked like the far better team, which is all the proof that you need in saying, hey, just add that one guy who we can just rely on to score 27 to 30 points a night. And then everything else is really clicking into place. The defense is there. The coaching is there. We've got depth, all that stuff. And now you're going to have to get rid of some of that stuff in order to go out and get that guy who we'll talk about in a second. But all this stuff is really there. They're just missing that one piece. And we kind of knew it. It became cemented with this playoff series. And I say that because we already knew they didn't have the go-to scorer, but we didn't know, okay, well, are they really a go-to scorer away? And they were a go-to scorer away from advancing in this round. And this defense has been awesome all year. So that defense is going to be there. But they were a go-to scorer away from advancing in this round. That to me shows in this Western Conference that you're still pretty close. And I think learning that in the playoffs gives this Houston Rockets front office clarity. Gives them clarity in saying, this is what we need to do. It also, I think, gave them clarity on Jalen Green. I was really impressed with Jalen Green in March. And I've used this stat a few different times, but I'm going to use it again. When Jalen Green scored 30-plus points in the regular season, the Rockets were 13-1. When he's on, man, that guy is unstoppable. It feels like he could do things athletically that very few players in the league can do. And I think it's fair to call him streaky. But when he's feeling it, man, he gives them that number one option that they otherwise don't really have, other than the few nights where Fred VanVleet has it going. But Fred VanVleet, to me, is more stable tone setter, table setter guy. Jalen Green is the scorer. He's the guy that they need when he's playing like that. But then in this series, he was not good. He was not very good in this series. He had that big 38-point game in the series. But other than that, 12 points, 11 points, 9 points, 8 points, 8 points, 7 points. He had 8 points in Game 7 on 3 of 8 shooting, 1 assist. He had a combined 6 assists across the last 3 games of this series. So he's not the scorer that you need consistently. We know that with Jalen Green at this point. And he's not really the passer playmaker that you need either. So when he's not scoring, he's kind of just getting in the way. And that becomes a problem for Houston. Because you kind of have to just ride it out unless you think somebody else is going to have it. And there have been nights where Fred VanVleet has it. Heck, there's been nights where Thompson has it, and they're able to kind of just sit Jalen Green at the end of these games. But there's other nights where it's just like, yeah, we're kind of like, it's been a rough 3 quarters, but can he kind of find something in this fourth quarter? Because he's just one of those guys where you never really know. But ultimately, I think we know who Jalen Green is. And if this team is just a piece away, Jalen Green feels like the most logical candidate to move. Can you turn Jalen Green into that piece? The sometimes piece into an always piece. Can we turn Jalen Green sometimes piece into X star player always piece? And that becomes a little bit more difficult because I talked about Jalen Green's contract before the season. I think it's fascinating. He signed that $30 million a year for the 2+1, the one being the player option here. And I was like, why did Houston do that? That felt like a weird thing to do. Didn't feel necessary. You're tying up your immediate future into Jalen Green. You're not able to trade him this year because he's fresh off of that contract and you have the poison pill and all that stuff. So, like, what are you really doing with this? Why couldn't you have just visited that over the summer, depending on what Jalen Green's season looked like? And then I said that they were right about it. Because of the season that they had. The Jalen Green contract was not a distraction for them the way that Jonathan Kuminga's contract in Golden State was definitely a distraction for Kuminga in Golden State. So maybe on one hand, the Rockets don't have the season they had if they're dealing with this distraction with Jalen Green's contract. On the other hand, now they got to deal with it. And what's weird about it is if you're Houston, I don't think Jalen Green is worth $30 million a year right now. And I don't know that he proved that he's worth $30 million a year this season when you include the playoffs. And the playoffs were bad. So it's like, all right, $30 million a year, that's a little heavy for him. I'm not saying he's like, that's more of a projection going forward. Can Jalen Green become a $30 million a year player, which I would say is not a superstar, not even really an all-star, but that's in today's NBA, a very high-end role player, borderline all-star. And Jalen Green is not that now. Maybe he can become that. But after having 1 year already done on this, the window is shrinking for him to become that. And then he's got that player option in that 3rd year. So if he does become that, or if he even becomes a real all-star, borderline all-NBA kind of guy, well, he's going to opt out of that 3rd year, and then you're going to have to pay him a bunch of money. So if you're the Rockets and you're looking to potentially trade Jalen Green, the acquiring team is going to be looking at kind of the same deal with Jalen Green. It's like, okay, we're going to get this guy who we don't really know. We might like him from afar, but we don't know him. He hasn't been in our building. We're going to have a couple of years with him, and then we're going to be forced with a pretty tough decision potentially. And do we think we can get to know this guy in 2 years in a way that Houston either didn't get to know him? Do we think that he's going to improve in our system in 2 years more than he improved in Houston for more than that? It's a tough spot if you're the acquiring team to be in taking him, which is why I think he could be part of a trade. I don't know that he's the headliner. I think maybe the picks going out, or they might actually have to get off of, is it an Alperen Şengün? Is it Jabari Smith Jr.? To me, Thompson would be untouchable. But Is it Amen Thompson? I don't know. Like, who's the headliner in that trade? And is Jalen Green a nice piece, but like a salary ballast piece going out? Because again, he's on that larger contract where those younger players aren't necessarily on that contract. So obviously the names that are out there, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker would be the dream scenario. If Phoenix was willing to entertain offers for Devin Booker for whatever reason. Houston has the Phoenix picks. We know all of that already. Like, okay, the thing is they can afford to be patient on this because they were the number 2 seed in the West, and they don't necessarily have to make a move this summer. They can wait, but the longer you wait, the more you're kind of messing with it. And again, I don't know that, like, this team is so deep. You couldn't even get Reed Shepherd on the floor, and you kind of have to figure out what's going on with him. Like, could he be that go-to scorer? He's arguably the most talented offensive player on the roster, just raw talent, and you didn't really get a chance to see him. That feels like a little bit of an L this season. Cam Whitmore's not even playing, and you really liked him a couple years ago. This team has things that they have to move. It feels like they need to make a condensed trade here, a consolidation trade here. And Jalen Green feels like the guy's got to go because even if you bring him back, he's just going to get in the way of Amen Thompson. And I've brought this up before, but Jalen Green and Amen Thompson don't play well together. It's very much a your turn, my turn thing. And there were times even this regular season, even in the playoffs sometimes, where it felt like Amen Thompson was waiting for Jalen Green to give him the signal, hey, I got it or I don't got it, including in Game 7 where Jalen Green took a bunch of shots early and it wasn't working out. And then Amen Thompson took over in that third quarter and scored all those points and went on that little flurry there. And it was like, oh, wow, Amen Thompson could get them back in this game. And then he has the calf injury. And who knows what happens after that if he doesn't serve the calf injury. But it just feels like Amen Thompson's always waiting on Jalen Green to give him the signal, hey, is this a game where I get to go off? Or is this a game where I'll just do all the defensive stuff that I do at such a high level and you've got it on offense for us? And I don't think that's good for Amen's development. I think Amen Thompson could be a legit two-way star in the league. And as soon as the sooner you get Jalen Green out of there, or somebody who just works better with Amen Thompson in there, maybe you could start to figure that out and he could start to reach that potential. Because I think the sky's the limit for that guy, and I think Houston agrees. So it feels like they got to trade Jalen Green. I just don't know who they do it for. I mentioned the Phoenix guys. Throwing this out there, would they do it for Ja? Would they do it for Ja Morant? I don't know. I don't know that Memphis would do it. I don't know. I'm just thinking like Ja Morant, when he's healthy, is kind of that guy. He's not an every night guy for a very different reason than Jalen Green. Jalen Green is very durable. He's available. Ja Morant, obviously not that, but when he's out there, he is that guy. Is that something you'd be willing to do? That feels a little too, 3 a.m. in Las Vegas at the blackjack table, and you're kind of running low on money, and you just say, whatever, here's the rest of my chips. We'll put it all in one hand. That feels a little too much like that for a team that is young and doesn't necessarily need to do that like Houston. But it was just a thought that came across my mind. So, look, was this season a success for the Rockets? Yes. The Rockets were never going to contend. We knew that. Them being the number 2 seed does not change that. But this season did establish them as a legit playoff team in the Western Conference, which is not easy to do. And more importantly, it established that Houston is one piece away, which is not what we thought they would be a year ago. I'll be back later this week with more on the NBA playoffs here at Real GM Radio. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.